Markiewitz Audioworks proudly presents Edgar Allan Poe's Manuscript Found in a Bottle, performed by Jason Markiewitz, with music by Hayden. How many stories of pirates, hurricanes, whirlpools, ghost ships, and oceanic phenomena encountered upon the sea are based upon fact? How many are the result of legends, superstitions, or fears? And how many are simply fantastical fiction in its truest form? In 1833, Edgar Allan Poe mixed the macabre with the supernatural when, as one of 6 tales he entered into a short story writing contest, he crafted Manuscript Found in a Bottle. Written well before his more famous Gothic tales, this story defeated more than 100 other entries and won the aforementioned contest, earning him a prize of $50 and publication in the October 19, 1833 edition of Baltimore's Saturday Visitor newspaper. Poe went on to write 2 more nautical short stories, A Descent into the Maelstrom and The Oblong Box, as well as his only full-length novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, which he authored in 1837 and which, coincidentally, also ends abruptly near Antarctica. Manuscript Found in a Bottle is widely believed to be the story that launched Poe's career as a writer, though it is also suggested that it was written as a satire on the sea stories of the day. Regardless, it predates many stories of similar themes like Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and it even garnered high praise from author Joseph Conrad of Heart of Darkness fame, whose turn-of-the-century tales of life at sea and other exotic places are still considered English literary masterpieces today. In this story, Poe describes, and we have endeavored to preserve, fantastic storms, harsh conditions, ghostly encounters, and the perils of being pulled into a gigantic whirlpool near the Earth's icy southern pole. We hope you enjoy this audio dramatization of Edgar Allan Poe's Manuscript Found in a Bottle.
In the dawn of my 16th year, I left my home and spent years traveling across foreign lands. Eventually, whether by accident or by providence, I found myself at the port of Batavia on the rich and populous island of Java. It was here, in the year 1833, that I set out on my next great adventure and secured passage aboard a magnificent ship destined for places unknown. Oh, the vessel was a beautiful ship of about 400 tons, copper-fastened, with 3 large masts and massive rolls of sails braced against the sky above a deck of Malabar teak. Native laborers loaded carts full of textiles and other luxuries such as cotton wool and oil, jaggery, ghee, coconuts, as well as a few cases of opium. In the distance, I heard the final call to board the ship. I flung my pack over one shoulder and with a deep breath ascended the gangway alongside a tall man who muttered something excitedly to me in what sounded like Swedish. The captain ordered the moorings cleared and we got underway with barely a breath of wind, and for many days crept slowly along the eastern coast of Java. But one evening, nearly a week after leaving port, and while leaning over the rail at the stern of the ship, I observed a very singular, isolated cloud to the northwest. It was remarkable in its color, and was the first such cloud we had seen since our departure from Batavia. I watched it attentively until sunset, when it spread all at once to the eastward and westward, settling on the horizon with a narrow strip of vapor, and looking like a long line of low beach. I was soon afterwards attracted by the dusky red appearance of the moon and the peculiar character of the sea. The latter was undergoing a rapid change, and the water below us at about 15 fathoms seemed more than usually transparent. The air now became intolerably hot, As night came on, every breath of wind died away, and a more entire calm it is impossible to conceive. The flame of a candle burned upon the aft deck without the least perceptible motion. The captain, a burly man with a round belly and sour disposition, called out to us from across the ship that he saw no indication of danger, and as we were drifting toward the shore, ordered the sails to be furled and the anchor lowered. The largely Malaysian crew sprang to work as if their very lives were at stake and stretched themselves deliberately on the deck. After a few minutes, I noticed the changing scene around us. The sky was growing increasingly red, and as the candle on the aft deck was snuffed by a contrary breeze, the clouds seemed to frown upon the ship. The crew continued their work as per the captain's orders. Seeing the activity and commotion of the crew and the presentment of evil in the hot, dust-laden wind now encircling our position, I approached the captain and expressed my fears. He proceeded to laugh heartily at my concerns and paid me no attention whatever before going below.
Get out of my way, boy.
That night, my uneasiness still churning through me, I was prevented from sleeping, and about midnight I went upon deck. The storm had continued to build during the evening hours. As I placed my foot upon the upper step of the companion ladder, I was startled with a loud humming noise, and before I could ascertain its meaning, the ship began to rattle furiously underneath me. In the next instant, a wilderness of seawater and foam threw me from my step and swept across the ship from stem to stern. The extreme fury of the blast proved the great strength of the ship's construction. Although completely waterlogged and pushed forcefully underneath the magnificent wave, she rose heartily, and as if defiant against the forces of nature and the tempest itself, staggered and righted upon the sea once again. By what miracle I escaped my own death, it is impossible for me to say. Stunned by the shock of the water and having been thrown mightily from my perch, I found myself upon recovery jammed in between the stern post and rudder. With great difficulty I stood, and looking dizzily around, was awestruck beyond my wildest imagination to discover we had in fact been engulfed in a whirlpool of mountainous and foaming ocean. It was magnificent to behold, and I feared I may have been the only one to survive. My fear subsided as I heard the voice of a fellow shipmate, an old Swede who had boarded the ship at the same time as I. I pressed my hands against my eyes, pushing the seawater away, and called to him with all my strength. Through the mist, I saw his visage proceeding to my position at the aft of the great ship. We soon discovered that we were the only survivors. All who were on deck, with the exception of ourselves, had been swept overboard, and the captain and mates must have perished as they slept, for the cabins were deluged with water. The Swede and I could do little to steer or secure the ship without assistance, and we expected we might sink. The hurricane had overwhelmed our vessel, with fierce wind and seas passing over us, parting the cable and shattering the framework. In almost every respect we had received considerable injury. In time, the main fury of the storm passed, and while the violent wind persisted, we looked forward to it passing by as well. For in our shattered condition, we should inevitably perish in any subsequent storm. But the wind did not stop. Day turned into night, and back into day, and the wind persisted. The old Swede and I stayed below deck as much as possible, and relegated control of our vessel to whatever providence had taken control of our destiny. For 5 entire days and nights we ate small quantities of jaggery, which we procured with great difficulty from the forecastle. The furious hurricane moved our ship at a rate defying computation, and while the winds were not equaling the initial onset, they were still more terrific than any tempest I had ever encountered before. Our course for the first 4 days was, with trifling variations, south-southeast, and we must have run down the coast of New Holland. But by the 5th day, the cold became extreme, and the wind shifted to a point more to the northward. We moved upon deck, and bundled in blankets and odd bedding, we surveyed the strange landscape around us. The sun arose with a sickly yellow luster, and clambered a very few degrees above the horizon, emitting no decisive light. There were no clouds whatever apparent, yet the wind had again increased and blew with a fitful and unsteady fury. About noon, as early as we could guess, our attention was again arrested by the appearance of the sun. It emitted no light, but a dull and sullen glow unaccompanied by any ray. And, almost as quickly as it appeared, it sank again into the depths of the horizon. We waited in vain for the arrival of the 6th day. That day to me has not yet arrived, and to my friend never did arrive. Thenceforward we were enshrouded in a darkness so black we could not have seen an object at 20 paces from the ship. Eternal night continued to envelop us. Even the water had lost the phosphorescence we had been accustomed to in the tropics only a few days before. We also observed that although the tempest continued to rage with unabated violence, there were no longer waves, or surf, or foam, which had previously attended us. Instead, all around us was horror and gloom and a blackness bereft of life. Superstition's terror crept slowly into the spirit of the old Swede, and my own soul was wrapped up in silent wonder. We neglected all care of the ship worse than before, and securing ourselves to the broken stump of mast, looked out bitterly into the vastness of the ocean. We had no means of calculating time, nor could we form any guess of our situation. We were, however, well aware of having made farther to the southward than any previous navigators, and felt extreme amazement at not meeting with the usual impediments of ice. In the meantime, every moment threatened to be our last. Every mountainous billow hurried to overwhelm us. The swell surpassed anything I had imagined possible, and that we were not instantly buried is a miracle. At once, the ship descended at a magnificent rate. My companion spoke of the lightness of our cargo and reminded me of the excellent qualities of our ship, but I could not help feeling utterly hopeless, and prepared myself gloomily for that death which I thought could be upon us within the hour. The ship moved with increased speed, and with every knot the ship made, the swelling of the black stupendous seas became more dismally appalling. At times we gasped for breath, and at times we became dizzy with the velocity of our descent into some watery hell, where the air grew stagnant and no sound disturbed the slumbers of the Kraken. We at last arrived at the bottom of one of these abysses, when a quick scream from my companion broke fearfully upon the night. "See! See!" cried he, shrieking in my ears. "Almighty God! See! See!" As he spoke, I became aware of a dull, sullen glare of light which rolled down the sides of the vast chasm where we lay, and threw a brilliant glow upon our deck. Casting my eyes upward, I beheld a spectacle which froze the current of my blood. At a terrific height, directly above us appeared a gigantic ship of nearly 4,000 tons. Although upreared upon the summit of a wave of more than 1,000,000 times her own altitude, her apparent size still exceeded that of any ship of the line in existence. Her huge hull was of a deep, dingy black, unrelieved by any of the customary carvings of a ship. A single row of brass cannon protruded from her open ports, and dashed off from their polished surfaces the fires of innumerable battle lanterns, which swung to and fro about her rigging. But what mainly inspired us with horror and astonishment was that she bore up under a press of sail in the very teeth of that supernatural sea and of that ungovernable hurricane. When we first discovered her, her stupendous bows were alone to be seen as she rose up like a demon of the deep, slowly from the everlasting gulf beyond her. For a moment of intense terror, she paused upon the giddy pinnacle, as if contemplating her own demise, then pitched forward and tumbled downward toward us. At this instant, I know not what sudden self-possession came over my spirit. Staggering as far aft as I could, I awaited fearlessly the ruin that was to overwhelm us. Our own vessel was at length ceasing from her struggles and sinking with her head to the sea. The shock of the descending mass struck her, consequently in that portion of her frame which was already underwater, and the inevitable result was to hurl me upward with irresistible violence upon the rigging of the other vessel. As I descended from my perch among the rigging, I quietly moved about the ghostly ship, and amidst the confusion, escaped any notice from the crew. I made my way unperceived to the main hatchway, which was partially open, and crept inside. A sense of awe overcame me as I looked upon the navigators of this ship, who moved about the internal compartment. I was unwilling to trust myself with a race of people who had offered, to the cursory glance I had taken, so many points of vague novelty, doubt, and apprehension. I therefore thought proper to contrive a hiding place in the hold. This I did by removing a small portion of the shifting boards in such a manner as to afford me a convenient retreat between the huge timbers of the ship. I had scarcely completed my work when a footstep in the hold forced me to duck inside. A man passed by my hiding place with a feeble and unsteady gait. I could not see his face, but had an opportunity of observing his general appearance. He was old and sickly looking. His body quivered with age. He muttered to himself in a low, broken tone some words of a language which I could not understand. He trudged up the stairs and made his way onto the deck. I considered following him for a moment, but decided at last against it. I never saw him again. A feeling for which I have no name has taken possession of my soul during my time on this ghostly vessel. It has been a very long time since I first trod the deck of this terrible ship, and if the nature of the incomprehensible crew is any indication of the future before me, I should become increasingly clear as to my pending destiny. The crewmen walk about in a meditative state which I cannot understand. They pass by me without a second glance, as if I was not present in any way. I used to hide in their presence, but have determined that it makes no difference, for the crewmates will not see me. It was not more than a moment ago when I passed directly before the eyes of one who I believed to be the first mate, and he paid me no notice whatever. This brings to light a confession. It was not long ago, upon the second or third day of my voyage upon this strange ship, that I ventured into the captain's own private cabin and, well, truthfully, stole the materials with which I write, and have written for some time. I shall from time to time continue this journal. It is true that I may not find an opportunity of transmitting it to the world, but I will not fail to make the endeavor. If my end is at last upon me, and at the last moment of my life I will enclose the manuscript in a bottle and cast it within the sea. I have made many observations lately upon the structure of this vessel, which only recently and by mere chance I learned was called Discovery. What she is not, I can easily perceive. What she is, I fear it is impossible to say. Although she is not well armed, she would seem to be a ship of war. Her huge size and overgrown suits of canvas, her severely simple bow and antiquated stern seemed to be designed of ages long ago. I have also been inspecting the timbers of this ship. She is built of a material unfamiliar to me. There is a peculiar character about the wood which strikes me as rendering it unfit for the purpose to which it has been applied. I mean, its extreme porousness, considered independently of the worm-eaten condition which is a consequence of navigation in these seas, and apart from the rottenness attendant upon age. It will appear perhaps an observation somewhat over-curious, but this wood has every characteristic of Spanish oak, swelled by unnatural means. About an hour ago, I decided to boldly thrust myself among a group of the crew. As I had suspected, they paid me no manner of attention, and although I stood in the very midst of them all, seemed utterly unconscious of my presence. Similar to the one I had at first seen in the hold, they all bore about them the marks of a hoary old age. Their knees trembled with infirmity, their shoulders were bent double with decrepitude, their shriveled skins rattled in the wind, their voices were low, tremulous, and broken, their eyes glistened with the rheum of years, and their gray hairs streamed terribly in the tempest. They continued to work, as if in a trance, and the ship being thrown dead off the wind, has held her terrific course due south. Between the wind, the seas, and the icy conditions, I found it increasingly difficult to maintain a footing on the deck, though the crew seemed to experience little inconvenience. It has dawned on me that I mentioned going into the captain's cabin, but have not mentioned the captain himself. Be it known that while almost never seen on deck, I did see the captain face to face in his own cabin, but as I expected, he paid me no attention. Although in his appearance there was, to a casual observer, nothing which might bespeak him more or less than man, still a feeling of irrepressible reverence and awe mingled with the sensation of wonder with which I regarded him. In stature, he is nearly my own height. That is, I mean about 5 feet 8 inches. He is of a well-knit and compact frame of body, neither robust nor remarkably otherwise. But it is the singularity of the expression which reigns upon the face. It is the intense, the wonderful, the thrilling evidence of old age so utter, so extreme, which strikes upon my soul with the shock of a galvanic battery. His forehead, although little wrinkled, seems to bear upon it the stamp of myriad years. His gray hairs are records of the past, and his grayer eyes are tellers of the future. The cabin floor was thickly strewn with strange iron-clasped folios and moldering instruments of science, and obsolete, long-forgotten charts. His head was bowed down upon his hands, and he pored with a fiery, unquiet eye over a paper which I took to be a commission, and which at all events bore the signature of a monarch. He muttered to himself, as did the first seaman whom I saw in the hold, some low, peevish syllables of a foreign tongue, and although the speaker was close at my elbow, yet his voice seemed to reach my ears from the distance of a mile. The ship and all in it are imbued with the spirit of old age. The crew glide to and fro like the ghosts of buried centuries. Their eyes have an eager and uneasy meaning, and when their figures fall athwart my path, I feel as I never have felt before. When I look around me, I feel ashamed of my former apprehensions. If I trembled at the blast which was hitherto attended us, shall I not stand aghast at a warring of wind and ocean to convey any idea of which the words tornado and simoom are trivial and ineffective? All in the immediate vicinity of the ship is the blackness of eternal night and the chaos of foamless water. But about a league on either side of us may be seen indistinctly and at intervals stupendous ramparts of ice, towering away into the desolate sky and looking like the walls of the universe. As I imagined, the ship proves to be in some sort of a massive current, if that description is enough to detail the howling tide that pushes us southward with such speed by the walls of ice and snow, some of which tower above us at great heights. To conceive the horror of my sensations is, I presume, utterly impossible. Yet a curiosity to penetrate the mysteries of these awful regions predominates even over my despair, and will reconcile me to the most hideous aspects of death. It is evident that we are hurrying onwards to some exciting knowledge, some never-to-be-imparted secret whose attainment is destruction. Perhaps this current leads us to the southern pole itself. It must be confessed that a supposition apparently so wild has every probability in its favor. The crew pace the deck with unquiet and tremulous steps, but there is upon their countenances an expression more of the eagerness of hope than of the apathy of despair. In the meantime, the wind is still at our backs, and as we carry a crowd of canvas, the ship is at times lifted entirely out of the sea. Oh, horror upon horror! The ice opens suddenly to the right and to the left, and we are whirring dizzily in immense concentric circles, round and round the borders of a gigantic amphitheater, the summit of whose walls is lost in the darkness and the distance. But little time will be left me to ponder upon my destiny. The circles rapidly grow small. We are plunging madly within the grasp of the whirlpool, and amid a roaring and bellowing and shrieking of ocean and of tempest, the ship is quivering, oh God, and going down. I moved quickly into the hold, past the oblivious crew, and discovered an empty bottle rattling among the stores. I rolled the manuscript into a tight spill and forced it mightily into the neck of the green glass, secured it with a cork, and as if in a single motion, with death less than a single pace behind me, I scaled the steps to the deck and hurled the bottle into the sea.
We hope you have enjoyed Markiewitz Audioworks' presentation of Edgar Allan Poe's Manuscript Found in a Bottle, performed from a script written and adapted for audio by Jason Markiewitz. Music for this production was composed and performed by Hayden. Cover art designed by John Markiewitz. This has been a Markiewitz Audioworks presentation. Copyright 2024 by Jason Markiewitz. Production copyright by Jason Markiewitz. All rights reserved.